Stick to mops, Maria. Grown folks are talking numbers. That was the moment everything changed. When a janitor dared to question a missing document, the billionaire CEO mocked her in front of the entire boardroom. But what he didn't realize was that she had once trained as a forensic accountant, and her eyes never forgot the truth. What began as public humiliation turned into a silent investigation. As she uncovered a sweeping fraud that ran through the heart of the company, the cleaner no one noticed became the force that brought an empire to its knees. This is the gripping story of a woman who was underestimated, silenced, and erased until she became the reckoning no one saw coming. Now, before we dive deeper, please subscribe to our channel. We share powerful, meaningful stories like this every day. And drop a comment below to let us know where you're watching from. Thank you so much, and now let's get back to the story. What did you just say? Victor Langston's voice cut through the polished boardroom like a blade of ice. The room fell silent. 30 eyes, executives in $1,000 suits and heels, turned toward the back corner where Maria Delgado stood awkwardly beside a cart of cleaning supplies. Her hands were still gloved. The faint scent of pine disinfectant clung to her uniform. Maria hesitated. She hadn't meant to speak. Not really. Not during a meeting like this. But the words had slipped out before she could stop them. I just said, the financial ledger from Q4, it's not in the archive room where it usually is. It's missing. For a moment, no one moved. Then Victor laughed. Loudly. Cruelly. As if she'd told a joke no one else had caught yet. You're the cleaner, he said, turning his full body, now eyes cold and narrowed. You mop floors, not balance books. Maybe you confused a dust rag for a document. The boardroom erupted in restrained chuckles. A few tried to hide their amusement behind their hands. Others didn't bother. The joke was easy, too easy. Maria felt a slow, hot flush crawl up her neck. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest, not from embarrassment, but from the sharp sting of being so casually dismissed. She lowered her eyes, muttered a quiet apology, and turned to leave, pushing her cart through the glass doors past the laughing people whose shoes she'd polished just an hour earlier. But Victor didn't stop. See, folks, he said, smiling as he turned back to the board. This is what happens when you don't set boundaries. Give them an inch, they'll ask to manage the books next. Someone murmured, unbelievable, but no one challenged him. Maria heard every word. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat alone in her small apartment, sipping cheap coffee from a cracked mug, staring at the ledger page she'd quietly snapped a photo of before it disappeared from its usual folder. The numbers hadn't made sense. A $2.3 million disbursement with no vendor ID, no invoice, no paper trail except this page she'd found discarded behind the printer station like trash. Maria Delgado was not some uneducated cleaner off the street. Once upon a time, she'd been a top accounting student at NYU. She'd had dreams of boardrooms, of certifications, of white-collar precision. But life had a habit of turning promise into rubble. Her mother had died in a care home scandal, leaving Maria with 3 younger siblings and a mountain of debt. By the time she paid off the hospital bills and took custody of her niece, the dreams had gone silent. The mop had become her livelihood. But numbers still whispered to her, even now, especially now. And that whisper was loud enough to drown out Victor Langston's laughter. She stared again at the photo. The disbursement code didn't match any of the usual internal systems. And why route funds through an inactive project account? She opened her old laptop, slow cracked along the hinge, but still kicking, and began cross-referencing what she could remember from her years as an unpaid intern in financial auditing. Something wasn't just missing. Something was wrong. At 5:43 a.m., she returned to the building. She had an early shift, technically. But this wasn't about the shift. She passed security without a word. She'd worked there long enough that no one questioned her comings and goings. The janitorial badge opened every floor. She rode the elevator alone to level 6, the finance wing, just as the morning sun bled through the high-rise glass. No one else was in yet. She moved quickly, silently, wheeling her cart into the hallway, then stepping into the records room. Nothing had changed. Except the one folder she remembered from last week, Project Windmere, was gone. No audit file. No digital backup in the computer index. Gone. As if it had never existed. Maria stood in the quiet hum of the records room, frozen in the eerie stillness. She felt it in her bones. Not fear, but purpose. That feeling she hadn't touched in years. The one that had once made her stay up all night solving ledgers and tracing inconsistencies for her professors. Her hands didn't shake as she began opening drawers, scanning files, snapping photos. At exactly 6:15 a.m., she found another anomaly, Project Sherborne, closed 3 years ago, yet still actively routing funds through a defunct supplier chain. And on the invoice copy, authorized by V. Langston. Maria felt her chest tighten, not with fear, but fury. He had laughed in her face, mocked her voice, and yet here he was, signing off ghost projects worth millions. And no one said a word, because no one else had bothered to look. She pocketed the photos in a small flash drive she wore on a chain beneath her shirt, and quietly she wheeled her cart out, nodding to the receptionist as the first rays of sun turned the marble floors gold. Victor Langston hadn't just underestimated her, he had forgotten her, and now she was invisible. Exactly what she needed to be. The silence of the finance wing lingered in her thoughts long after Maria left it behind. Back in her cart closet, tucked away behind the supply hallway on the second floor, she slid the heavy door shut, took off her gloves, and exhaled. The moment she was alone, the weight in her chest collapsed into a whisper. "This is bigger than you thought." She sat on a milk crate, pulled the flash drive from around her neck, and stared at it like it might explode. Ghost accounts, empty project shells, falsified authorizations. This wasn't a mistake. It was a web deliberate, careful, and concealed, just enough that no one who mattered would look twice, except her. Maria's fingers trembled as she pulled out her old, dented phone. She typed a number she hadn't used in nearly 4 years. The screen blinked. Then a name appeared, Liam Park. She hesitated, then sent the message, "Can I talk to you? It's about something I found. It's serious. Please." Liam had been an intern when Maria first met him. Bright-eyed, awkward, always carrying 2 phones and forgetting both. But unlike others, he never looked down on her. He brought her coffee once, not out of pity, but because she once helped him find his security badge before a big presentation. Small moments, kind ones. And she remembered every one. The reply came 6 minutes later. "I start at 10. Come to the 11th floor utility stairs. No cameras there." Maria stood quickly, her hands steadied. The stairs smelled of paint thinner and dust. On the 11th floor landing, she waited, heart ticking like a clock ready to chime. At 10:02, Liam appeared, messy hair satchel slung over one shoulder, frowning into his phone. He looked up surprised to see her there already. "Maria, you okay?" She held up the flash drive. "I need your help." He blinked. "With what?" Maria met his eyes. "I think your CEO is stealing millions from your company." It took less than 5 minutes to tell him what she'd found. The rest data routing, closed projects, invoice forgery she showed him on the flash drive. As he plugged it into his tablet, the hallway filled with the faint hum of fans and fluorescent buzz. Liam scrolled. His expression changed, first confusion, then disbelief, then something colder. "Victor authorized these?" he asked softly. Maria nodded. "Or someone forged his name. But the way these are formatted, it's how he used to sign everything when he was VP. Most people wouldn't catch that detail." He rubbed his temples. Jesus. She could see it hit him. His face paled. "This isn't one mistake. This is systematic." "Exactly," she said. "And someone tried to bury it." Liam looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "You figured this out? On your own?" Maria didn't answer. She didn't have to. He paced the landing, breathing fast. Okay. If we go to the board now." "We won't make it to the board," she cut in gently. "Not yet. Victor controls the internal chain. Legal, HR, even IT logs. If we make noise too soon, this'll vanish. Liam stopped pacing. So what do we do? She looked down the stairwell, the shadows falling between rails and floors. We watch, quietly. We gather what we need. When it's enough, we make sure it gets in the right hands. Liam nodded slowly. Okay, I'm in. From that moment, a silent alliance formed between the forgotten cleaner and the overlooked analyst. They worked in whispers. Maria continued cleaning, moving unnoticed through the hallways. Her cart became a shield, her gloves a disguise. People spoke freely in front of her. They always had. But now she listened. Liam, meanwhile, dug into the server archives. He found encrypted folders hidden under legacy employee logins accounts from staff who had retired years ago. One belonged to a man who'd died in a car accident 6 months prior. That account had routed $800,000 in January. Dead men don't wire money, Liam whispered as he stared at the screen in disbelief. They met in hidden corners, supply closets, forgotten stairwells, parking garage shadows. Every meeting peeled back another layer. Every document revealed another lie. But the closer they got, the more dangerous it felt. One Friday, as Maria scrubbed the executive lounge, 2 senior managers walked in mid-conversation. Victor said we may need to sanitize the audit trail next week. Again. Yeah. Said some nosy intern flagged a mismatch and is asking around. Maria's grip on the sponge faltered. She kept her head down. Guy's a magician. He could burn the books and still get a bonus. They laughed. Left. She stood still for a long time. That night, Maria sat in the empty staff cafeteria. The lights buzzed overhead. Her reflection stared back from the vending machine glass. She was cleaning a lie. She was scrubbing the fingerprints of thieves, and they were laughing while they robbed the place blind. The next morning, everything changed. She arrived at work to find her ID badge deactivated. A stern woman from HR escorted her to a glass-walled conference room and handed her a letter. You're being placed on administrative leave pending an internal review. For what? Unauthorized access to confidential records, the woman replied. There's a concern you may have compromised protected files. Maria's heart dropped. Her mouth opened, but she saw the eyes behind the glass. Watching. Cold. Already certain. Liam was nowhere to be seen. 2 security guards appeared. One held out a hand. Please come with us. Maria stood slowly. She didn't resist. As they walked her through the lobby past the gleaming floors she'd once polished with pride, she met every stare with silence. Let them think what they want. She knew the truth, and the truth was now a storm, and it was coming. The elevator doors closed with a hollow finality, and Maria stood in silence, her reflection staring back in the golden surface like a stranger in uniform. Her mop cart was gone. Her badge was deactivated. Her name had been marked in some digital ledger with the invisible scarlet letter unauthorized access. She didn't cry. Not on the ride down. Not as the guard stood behind her with practiced indifference. Not even as she stepped through the towering glass doors for what they thought was the last time. Outside, the city moved on unconcerned. People in suits rushed by phones pressed to their ears. Horns blared. A street musician played a cracked saxophone on the corner near the subway stairs. Maria walked down slowly, one hand wrapped around the flash drive, still hanging beneath her collar like a crucifix. She felt exposed, alone, but not broken. In her apartment that night, a different kind of silence pressed against the walls. It wasn't the emptiness of shame. It was the kind of silence that came before a storm. The room was dark except for the pale glow of her laptop. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, not with fear, but precision. She opened every file Liam had passed to her in secret, cross-referenced every image, every number, every project Victor Langston had personally signed, buried, or ghosted, every vendor who didn't exist, every employee who had left or disappeared too quietly. She wrote it all down. By 2:15 a.m., she had mapped the full skeleton of the scheme. 7 years of siphoned funds, 4 ghost shell companies, 3 fake consultancy firms billing internal departments with inflated fees, all traced back to a series of closed-loop transfers, routed through an offshore entity registered in the Cayman Islands, cleverly disguised beneath layers of ambiguous holdings. Maria stared at the screen and whispered, "I was right." But being right wasn't enough. Not yet. She picked up her phone again. For the first time in 2 days, she dialed Liam, straight to voicemail. She tried again. Still nothing. On the third attempt, his voicemail greeting cut off midway and played a digital error tone. Her breath caught. They silenced him. She sent one final message. "Liam, if you're safe, don't respond. But if you still believe in truth, check your inbox. I'm sending everything. The world needs to see it. If I disappear, finish what we started." She didn't sleep. The next morning she sat on her fire escape sipping black coffee, the city stirring awake beneath her. For a fleeting second she almost allowed herself to wonder what would have happened if her life hadn't gone sideways, if her mother hadn't gotten sick, if she had stayed in school, if she had a leather chair and an executive title instead of a pair of rubber gloves. But then she remembered Victor's face-arrogant, amused cruel. He didn't just steal money, he stole the dignity of everyone beneath him. Maria sent the encrypted folder to a burner email Liam had once shared for emergencies only. Then she backed it up to 2 separate cloud drives. One was set to auto-send if she didn't log in within 48 hours. Only then did she open a tab and search for a name she hadn't typed in years, Professor Naomi Barrett. Once her favorite mentor, now a forensic accountant for a financial crimes task force. Maria hesitated just a moment, then typed, "You told me once, if you ever uncover something real, something big, don't come to me unless you're ready to change lives. I think I have something, and I'm ready now." She attached the summary document, included her cell number, and hit send. Then she waited. The call came 6 hours later. "Maria, is this really you?" "Yes." "My God, what did you find?" By nightfall, Professor Barrett had arranged a meeting with her 2 federal agents in a secure location downtown. Maria brought nothing but the flash drive and a spiral notebook filled with her handwriting, old school, meticulous, undeniable. She didn't dress differently. She wore the same shoes she used to mop marble floors. When she entered the room, the agents looked at her with initial skepticism. But within 20 minutes, they were silent. By the end of the meeting, one of them muttered, "How the hell did no one catch this?" Maria said quietly, "Because no one thought someone like me would." They promised to review everything, follow the paper trail, but they warned her it wouldn't be immediate. "These things take time," Barrett said. "Victor Langston has layers of insulation around him." Maria simply nodded. "Then I hope your blades are sharp enough to cut through it." The following week was a blur of waiting, checking shadows, watching her building for strangers, watching her phone for signs of Liam. And then, on a cold, wet Thursday morning, a black sedan parked outside her apartment. 2 men in suits stepped out, but they didn't knock on her door. They knocked on Liam's, across the street. Maria watched from the blinds, her hands pressed against the glass. No. She waited hours before daring to walk over. But Liam was gone. His apartment cleaned out. Only one item remained behind, taped to his door, a single folded napkin. Inside, it was a message. "You were right. Never stop. L." That night, Maria knew she had no choice. She would have to go alone, into the belly of a machine built on lies. But she was no longer just a cleaner. She was the reckoning they never saw coming. Rain came down in whispers, tracing faint silver rivers down the high-rise windows across from Maria's apartment. The world outside looked cleaner, softer, like the city was pretending to be innocent for a few hours. But inside, Maria was sharpening her truth. She paced barefoot over the cracked hardwood floor, her mind working faster than her body could keep up. There was no word from the agents, no calls, no messages from Professor Barrett, no update on Liam's sudden disappearance. It was the kind of silence that grows heavy, the kind that warns you they're working, but you don't know who they is anymore. She sat back at her laptop and opened the file for the 100th time. Every transfer, every forged signature, every dollar trail that had been meant to stay hidden, she memorized it like scripture. She could see Victor's scheme as if she were watching him move the pieces like a magician in slow motion, misdirecting, dazzling, hiding the truth beneath glimmering distractions. But even the best magicians slip when the wrong eyes are watching. Maria's eyes had never looked away. At 3:12 a.m., she closed the laptop, braided her hair back, and dressed in all black habitual, now almost ceremonial. She didn't carry anything incriminating. Just one photo in her wallet, her mother's smiling from the porch of the old house that no longer existed. That smile was all she needed to remind herself why she started this, and why she couldn't stop now. Maria headed back to the building, not as a janitor this time, not under the shield of fluorescent anonymity. She waited in the alley across from the delivery dock out of sight and watched. She needed one thing: access. It came in the form of Malik, the night security guard, who had once helped her when she fell asleep on the bench waiting for a late train. He'd covered for her, never mentioned it. A quiet ally. At 4:00 a.m., he stepped outside for a cigarette break. She approached from the shadows. Malik. He turned startled, then squinted. Maria. What the hell? You okay? I need 5 minutes inside, she said, her voice calm but urgent. No cameras, no questions, just 5 minutes. He looked at her for a long moment, eyes searching hers. They said you were fired. I was silenced. Another pause. Then he held out a small fob key. Take the service corridor. East elevator's offline for maintenance. Use it. She nodded. Thank you. He stepped back inside without another word. Maria moved quickly, her feet gliding over marble she once scrubbed for shine. The building, still and dark in the early morning hush, felt different now. It felt like a lie waiting to be broken open. On the 12th floor, she entered the main data room. The terminal at the far end still had access. Liam had shown her how to use it. She inserted a second flash drive, this one loaded with the trail she'd prepared for the agents, but enhanced with a fail-safe, a cascading send-out code that would auto-forward the files to over 40 contacts if triggered. She didn't trust silence anymore. She logged in, masked the connection through a private network, and sent the files again, this time to the press. Subject line, whistleblower evidence of corporate fraud. You need to see this before it disappears. She attached everything. When she hit send, she didn't flinch. Let the world see. She logged out and erased every trace. By the time the sun broke the skyline in bleeding oranges and reds, Maria was gone. That same morning, 8:43 a.m., a quiet storm rolled through the 14th floor executive wing. It started when an assistant opened an anonymous email and gasped so loudly the entire communications team froze. By 9:01, the legal department was scrambling. The CFO went pale. The board chairwoman canceled her trip to Geneva. And Victor Langston. He stormed into his corner office, slammed the door, and screamed at someone over speakerphone. But it was too late. Maria sat in a cafe across the street, watching through the large glass windows. She sipped black coffee and didn't blink once. Her phone vibrated. Private number. She answered. Miss Delgado, this is Special Agent Reese Calder. I wanted you to hear it from me first. The SEC is launching a full investigation into Langston Enterprises. We received your files. They're legitimate. They match intel we've been building for months. Maria closed her eyes for a moment, absorbing the words. You did the right thing, he added. That's what everyone says, she replied. Until it costs them something. There was a long pause. Then I think you've just cost a billionaire his empire. By noon, the story had broken across multiple financial news sites. Anonymous whistleblower exposes multi-million-dollar fraud scheme inside Langston Enterprises. Federal agents begin raids following massive leak. Cleaner turned whistleblower, who is Maria Delgado, Maria stared at the headlines and felt nothing. No pride, no fear, just stillness. It was done. But then an email came through from Liam. Just one line. "You started the fire. I'm back, ready to help burn it all down." Maria smiled for the first time in days, because now she wasn't alone. They called it a routine review, but everyone in the building knew better. It began on a Wednesday morning, gray and unforgiving, when two black SUVs pulled up outside Langston Enterprises just before 9 a.m. Federal agents dressed in suits that carried more weight than fashion stepped out with badges visible and faces unreadable. By 9:04 a.m., they entered the lobby. They didn't need to announce themselves. The receptionist, once the same woman who used to buzz Maria in with a half smile and a patronizing nod, froze mid-greeting. Her words caught in her throat as she saw the first agent raise a folder. "Federal Securities Division, we're here for Victor Langston." Elevators were locked down. Emails froze mid-send. Phones lit up across departments like fire alarms. People didn't run, but they stopped breathing. It wasn't chaos. It was worse. It was awareness. The kind that sinks in your stomach when you realize you've been part of a lie too big to name. Victor Langston was in his 14th floor office when the news reached him. A junior assistant barely out of college opened the door without knocking, her eyes wide, her voice trembling. "Sir, they're here." He looked up from his scotch, unbothered. "Who's here?" "The feds, sir." His face didn't change. Not at first. Then he stood slowly, like a man convinced gravity was beneath him. "Tell legal, and clear my 10 a.m. He adjusted his tie in the mirror, that same navy one he'd worn the day he mocked Maria Delgado in front of the board. As if nothing could ever touch him. As if consequences belonged to people without corner offices. He never made it to the elevator. The moment he stepped into the hallway, 3 agents moved in. One produced a warrant, another read his rights. The last clipped restraints around wrists that had once signed off on millions of stolen dollars without pause. The hallway was lined with silent faces, his assistant, his CFO, members of the board who had once toasted him as a visionary. None of them spoke, not one. And then a voice from behind, "I believe that's called poetic justice." Victor turned his head slowly and froze. Maria Delgado stood at the far end of the hall, not in a cleaner's uniform, not with a mop in hand. She wore a tailored black coat, her hair pulled back tight, a leather-bound folder clutched under one arm. She looked taller than he remembered, or maybe it was just that he'd never truly looked at her. His mouth twitched. "You..." She stepped forward. "Funny thing about cleaners," she said, her voice even and sharp. "We see everything you forget to hide." He didn't reply. He couldn't. The agents moved him past her. Her eyes never left his face. That same afternoon, the media swarmed. Helicopters hovered. News trucks parked outside. Headlines exploded. The board issued a statement. Legal teams scrambled. And somewhere buried beneath all of it, the janitor they laughed at became the name everyone wanted to say. Maria Delgado. She declined interviews. She ignored reporters. She didn't want a spotlight. She wanted something deeper, lasting. Justice wasn't about applause. It was about restoration. That evening, Maria sat in a quiet park 3 blocks from the building, the air crisp, her folder resting on the bench beside her. She watched the light shift through the trees, shadows chasing wind. Then a familiar voice joined her. "You're really not going to take credit?" Liam asked, sitting beside her. She glanced at him, his face thinner than before, eyes tired but burning. "You know me," she said softly. "I don't clean for praise." He laughed. "You brought down a billionaire." I told the truth. The rest brought itself down. He leaned back on the bench. "The board wants to meet you, by the way." She turned to him. "Why?" "Because you embarrassed them. Because they need a symbol. Because they're scared the next Maria is already watching." Maria looked away, her gaze drifting upward. Then let them be scared. Fear makes people careful. Liam nodded. They also offered a job. She raised an eyebrow. Doing what? Head of Compliance Investigations. She snorted. They want me to audit the very floors I once mopped. Exactly. She didn't answer right away, just smiled quietly. It was funny how the world turned like a wheel, slow, patient, inevitable. What goes up without integrity always comes down. Harder, louder, regretted. By nightfall, Maria walked back to the building, not through the back entrance, through the front, through glass doors that opened now, not for the cleaner, but for the one who cleaned the corruption they'd all ignored. People watched as she passed. Some lowered their eyes. Others nodded with respect. No one laughed. Victor Langston's office now sat empty. The same marble floors gleamed beneath her steps. Only now they reflected something different. A reckoning. The office smelled different now. Not of power, not of arrogance, but of dust and new beginnings. Maria stood inside Victor Langston's former suite, her fingers grazing the mahogany desk where corruption had once sat like a crown. His chair remained, large, padded, absurdly overdesigned, but no one dared sit in it. Not yet. The ghost of entitlement still lingered in the stitching. Outside the glass walls, the company moved like a wounded animal, slow, uncertain, exposed. Executives whispered behind closed doors. Middle managers double-checked records they once ignored. Assistants no longer rolled their eyes at janitors or interns. The air had changed. So had Maria. She had returned not as a cleaner, but as a contract consultant officially titled Interim Director of Internal Ethics and Oversight, though she preferred what the staff called her quietly, the woman who brought the truth. Her first act was not dramatic. It wasn't symbolic. It was simple. She requested access to the employee archives, and she read every file, every resignation letter, with language that smelled of quiet coercion, every retirement that arrived months after whistleblower complaints, every HR notation coded with euphemisms like attitude issues or inappropriate questioning. She traced them all and found patterns. Victor hadn't just stolen money, he'd stolen voices. He'd created a culture that made good people doubt their instincts and silence those who dared speak. But Maria hadn't come back for vengeance. She came for restoration. It started one afternoon when she knocked on a door no one had visited in months. "Cheryl Jackson?" she asked gently as the door opened. Cheryl blinked in confusion. "Yes." "My name's Maria Delgado. I used to clean here. You left a note in your exit file about payroll inconsistencies in the Africa Trade Division. You were ignored." Cheryl's mouth opened slowly. "You read that?" "I did, and I believe you." A long silence passed. Then Cheryl stepped aside. "Come in." By the end of the week, Cheryl had signed on as an internal investigator. By the end of the month, 5 others returned quiet warriors who had once walked away because no one would listen. Now they had Maria. She didn't raise her voice in meetings. She didn't dress like a CEO. But when she entered a room, the air shifted. People listened, because they knew she'd earned every word. But not everyone embraced her return. In a finance meeting on a rainy Tuesday, the acting CFO, Gerald Baines, one of Victor's old allies, folded his arms and looked her over. "Forgive me," he said with a tight smile, "but do you even have a degree in forensic accounting?" Maria smiled back, slow and razor-sharp. "I do now," she said. "Finished it 2 months ago, but I brought down your boss without one, so credentials seem overrated." The room fell silent. Baines cleared his throat and turned red. She didn't need a title. Her integrity was her some. But her strength didn't come without scars. At night she sat alone in the same apartment, though it felt like a different life. She still cooked rice and beans the way her mother did. Still kept the framed photo by the window. But now beneath that photo sat an award granted quietly by the Federal Task Force for Outstanding Civilian Contribution to Corporate Transparency. She didn't display it. She kept it tucked behind the curtain, because awards fade. But change is louder. One evening she received a letter in her company inbox, No name. Just a single sentence typed on an old typewriter, scanned and sent digitally. You saw us when we were invisible, thank you. She printed it, framed it, hung it on the inside of her desk drawer where no one else could see. Weeks passed. The board, once fractured, began rebuilding. Policies changed. Audits increased. Employees whispered about a new culture, but Maria knew better. Culture doesn't change with memos. It changes with eyes that never look away again. One Friday morning, she stepped onto the roof, the same place she used to sneak away for a break when her back ached and her knees burned. Now she stood taller, coat wrapped against the wind. Liam joined her. "You okay?" he asked, handing her a cup of tea. She nodded. "You ever think about how strange it is?" "What?" "That truth isn't loud. It's quiet, subtle, like a floor slowly giving way, and then all at once it collapses." He smiled. "You were the weight that made it fall." "No," she said, looking out over the city. "I was just the one who stopped pretending not to see." He let her be quiet for a while after that, then asked, "You staying?" She turned toward him. "For now. Long enough to build something that can't be torn down by ego again." "And after?" Maria looked at her hands. The same hands that once scrubbed toilets, carried trash, wiped down desks no one ever thanked her for. "After," she said, "maybe I teach someone else how to see." Because the truth doesn't belong to the powerful. It belongs to the ones who are never expected to find it. And Maria made it visible. The news cycle had moved on. The headlines that once roared with Maria's name faded beneath newer scandals, newer distractions. But inside Langston Enterprises, the aftershock still pulsed in quiet corners, whispered between cubicles, carried in the glances people exchanged when Maria walked by. Some called it reverence. Others called it fear. But Maria had no use for either. Her work had only begun. There was a heaviness to the office now, not dread, but reckoning. Desks once filled with sycophants now belonged to silent workers, watching, waiting. And the corridors no longer echoed with arrogance. They carried something different: accountability. It was subtle, intentional, measured. Maria moved through the building like a conductor with no baton guiding change, not with authority, but with presence. She reviewed every department audit herself. She implemented an anonymous reporting system and personally followed up on every claim. She knew what silence cost. She refused to let it rule again. One morning she received a message flagged as urgent. It was from a lower-level employee in procurement, someone Maria barely knew. "There's a file you need to see. Something feels off, but I don't know who else to trust." That sentence alone told Maria everything. The file revealed an unsettling truth. One of the board members had quietly been shifting company contracts to a vendor with hidden ties to his wife's business, a loophole Victor had taught them to exploit. The signature was neat, the paperwork almost flawless. But Maria's eyes had been sharpened by betrayal. She saw what others didn't. Again. She didn't escalate to the board. She went to the source. In the sleek, dimly lit conference room, she laid the papers on the table, face to face with Andrew Kemper, board treasurer and longtime family friend of the Langstons. He looked down at the documents, then up at her, a thin smile playing at his lips. "I'm not Victor." "No," she said evenly. "You're quieter, but the stain's the same." He leaned back. "You understand, don't you? These things happen, and you've already made your point, haven't you?" Maria tilted her head. "My point is truth. It's not a speech, Mr. Kemper, it's a standard." He narrowed his eyes. "Careful, Ms. Delgado. You've already rewritten the story once. You don't want to become a cautionary tale." She leaned forward, her voice barely a whisper. "You think you're warning me, but I lived the cautionary tale. I scrubbed its floor, I cleaned its blood, I buried it when no one else would. So if you think I'm afraid of being cast out again, you've misunderstood the person in front of you." He didn't respond. He didn't need to. The next morning, he resigned for personal reasons. The employees noticed. They noticed everything. and Maria made sure the ones who spoke up were never punished. In fact, she promoted one of them, Aisha, a young woman from HR, who had reported the issue originally and had almost been reprimanded under the old regime. Maria gave her a new title, Director of Internal Integrity. Aisha wept when she signed the offer letter. That day, Maria went home to her tiny apartment, poured a cup of tea, and stared at the skyline. The lights across the city blinked like tiny stars fighting through smog. She thought of her mother again, how she used to hum softly as she ironed Maria's old school uniform, even when the water heater was broken, even when they could barely afford electricity. "Make sure you leave the world cleaner than you found it," she used to say. Maria had taken that literally, until she realized sometimes it's not floors that need cleaning, but people power culture. Systems. That night, Liam called her. "You should see what's happening on Reddit." She chuckled. "What now?" "You're trending again." She rolled her eyes. "I don't care about being viral." "It's not just that. They're calling you the quiet storm. Some article called you the woman who taught corporate America to whisper again." Maria leaned against the wall phone pressed to her ear. "What does that even mean?" she asked, amused. "I think it means you made them scared to be loud with their lies." There was a pause. Then he added, "Maria, you changed the game." She didn't answer for a long time. When she did, her voice was soft. "No, I just refused to play it." They sat in silence across the line, a silence filled with the kind of mutual knowing only survivors carry, the kind built from scars, earned doing what others are too afraid to try. Maria wasn't fearless. She was simply unwilling to let fear define her story. The next day, she hosted a town hall in the building auditorium, no podium, no press, no title introductions. Just her. A chair, and a microphone. She looked at the faces of the people who had once walked past her without seeing her, people who now leaned forward to listen. She spoke plainly. "Some of you remember me as the woman who cleaned these floors. Some of you never noticed me at all. That's okay. I wasn't here to be noticed. I was here to do my job. But somewhere along the way I realized the real dirt wasn't under the desks. It was in the decisions being made above them." There was a murmur, a stillness. "I'm not here to punish. I'm not here to rule. I'm here to protect the truth. And that means all of you are responsible for it too. Every number, every note, every voice." She paused. "From now on, if you see something wrong, you don't whisper about it in the break room. You bring it to me. No fear, no filter. Because silence is what made this place sick. And truth is the only thing that can make it clean again." When she finished, the room was quiet. Then someone stood. Then another. Then everyone did. And for a moment, Maria felt the weight lift. Not because she was celebrated, but because they understood. Because they were ready to stand with her, not above her, with her. The applause faded slowly, but its echo stayed with Maria long after she stepped off the makeshift stage. She didn't linger for congratulations. She walked out of the auditorium the same way she had always moved, quiet, deliberate, with a posture that belonged more to someone pushing a janitor's cart than to someone now reshaping a corporate empire from the inside out. But that was Maria's power. She didn't conquer with noise. She conquered with presence. That afternoon, she returned to her temporary office. The walls were bare, the desk unadorned, but the inbox on her screen overflowed with messages. Not praise, not flattery, confessions. From anonymous employees, from people who had once been part of the silence. They spoke of backdoor bonuses, quiet discrimination, pressure to approve budgets that made no sense. She read every message, every word. She responded to each one with dignity, grace, and determination. But one name in the flood of messages caught her breath. Gloria Garrison. It had been years. Maria hadn't heard that name since the day she walked into Victor Langston's office to find her cleaning hours cut in half, reassigned to make room for a new efficiency hire. Gloria had been the woman in HR who processed the order, apologetic, cold. "It's just policy," she'd said. Now her message was different. "I think I helped bury something you uncovered. I'm ready to tell the truth now if you'll let me." Maria stared at the screen, then typed, "Come at 8 a.m. tomorrow. We'll talk." That next morning, Gloria arrived. Older now, smaller somehow. But when she sat across from Maria, her eyes met hers without flinching. "I wasn't brave," she said. "Back then, I was scared. Victor didn't have to say much. You either cooperated or you were erased." Maria listened without judgment. "I signed off on a lot of things I shouldn't have, but I also archived something. Quietly. I knew someday it might matter." From her bag, Gloria pulled out a slim file, physical, untouched, yellowed slightly with time. It was an internal memo, an early one, dated 5 years prior, subject Project Dawnlight. Note: discrepancy in expense reporting, amounts unverified. Flagged for review. Final action dismissed. No further investigation. Initialed VL. It was the earliest breadcrumb. Maria took it slowly, like a fragile piece of evidence in a trial the world had already tried to forget. "Why did you keep it?" she asked. Gloria looked down. "Because I watched you get humiliated in that boardroom, and I hated myself for knowing what I knew and staying quiet. I thought, if I couldn't stop it, then maybe one day I could help someone brave enough to try." Maria nodded. "You just did." They sat in silence for a while after that, and then Gloria stood. "If you need a witness when this goes higher, call me." Maria smiled faintly. "I will." After Gloria left, Maria scanned the document and added it to the master file she'd been compiling, what she now referred to as the Legacy Ledger. A full timeline of Victor Langston's fraud, built not just from data, but from the voices of those he had tried to silence. Each piece of truth had a name now. Each number, a face. That same day, a call came in from a lawyer representing a group of former employees wrongfully terminated during Victor's reign. They had seen the news, seen Maria's face. They wanted to file a class action suit against the board that had enabled him. Maria listened, then said one sentence, "If you're fighting to be heard, I'll make sure you're not alone in the room." She didn't promise victory. She promised visibility. That night, she walked home through the city alone. Rain clung to the air but never fell. Lights glimmered in puddles like secrets waiting to be discovered. Maria passed the corner deli where she used to eat her dinner on crates outside. The man at the window saw her. He came out wiping his hands on his apron. "Miss Maria." She stopped. "I saw you on the news," he said. "Didn't know you were that Maria." She smiled. "Still me." He looked down, awkward. "I always wondered why you never complained. When you'd sit there in the cold, always smiling." "I was just surviving," she said. "Some days, surviving is the rebellion." He nodded. "You make us proud. My daughter. She's studying accounting now. Says she wants to be like you." Maria's smile faltered for a second, overtaken by something heavier. "Tell her to be better." That night, Maria slept a little deeper. The city didn't feel as heavy. The walls of her apartment didn't lean in so much. And the next morning, she didn't return to her desk. She returned to the courtroom. Because the board of Langston Enterprises was being summoned, not just by regulators, but by the people they once erased. Maria would not testify as a janitor. She would testify as the architect of truth. The courtroom air was heavy, thicker than the rain that drizzled outside, thicker than the anticipation that hung over the city for weeks. It wasn't a criminal trial, not yet. This was a federal hearing, a place where silence was dissected and complicity was named. A stage built not for theatrics, but for truth. And seated near the center, flanked by lawyers with $1,000 ties and forced politeness, was the board of Langston Enterprises. Some looked bored, some looked afraid. None looked prepared for what was about to walk through the double oak doors. Maria entered without spectacle, no media entourage, no personal stylist. Just a dark navy dress, simple earrings, her hair pulled back tightly, and a folder in her hand, one that carried more weight than anything the board had ever signed. She was escorted by an agent from the Securities and Exchange Commission. No one spoke as she took the stand, but everyone watched. And then the lead investigator asked, "Ms. Delgado, can you tell us in your own words what led to your discovery?" Maria's hands folded gently over the folder. Her voice was steady, warm, but unwavering. "I was cleaning the boardroom when I overheard a conversation about a missing financial report. I'd cleaned that office for almost 8 years, and I'd memorized every file location, every shift in the archives. I knew what was supposed to be there, and I knew what was gone." She paused. Let the stillness sit. So I asked a question. Her gaze flicked briefly toward the defense table. The CEO laughed. He told me to stick to mops. A faint shift ran through the crowd. I didn't push back, I simply watched, listened. And what I heard and saw in the weeks that followed confirmed something I had long suspected, that silence wasn't just a mistake in that building. It was a system, one that rewarded loyalty to power and punished the inconvenient truth. One of the board members, Gerald Baines, cleared his throat. His lawyer leaned in, whispered something. He didn't speak aloud. Maria opened the folder slowly. "I compiled a timeline," she continued. "Every manipulated invoice, every phantom vendor, every account that routed money to offshore holdings under Victor Langston's control. But it wasn't just him. This system needed more than one hand, and the board they signed off on policies that made it possible." She laid down a printed spreadsheet. Page 1. Project Dawnlight. Flagged in 2019. Dismissed by this board. Then another. Page 2. Ghost payments routed through employee ID 7KLG3 belonging to a man who died in a car crash 6 months before the transaction date. A low gasp rippled through the back of the courtroom. Maria's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The company I worked for thought I was invisible, but I watched everything they tried to keep hidden. The presiding judge nodded slowly. "And what would you say, Ms. Delgado, was the cost of this silence?" Maria looked down for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice cracked, just slightly. "The cost was dignity. For every honest worker who got pushed out for asking too many questions. For every intern who was told to be quiet or be replaced. For every night I sat on a crate in the break room wondering how I'd pay rent while the man upstairs funneled millions into private yachts." A pause. "But the biggest cost was trust. And once that breaks, it doesn't just damage a company, it shatters people." The courtroom was still. A beat passed. Then the judge nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Delgado. You may step down." As she rose and turned to leave the witness box, her eyes locked briefly with one person in the audience. Cheryl. The woman whose voice had once been ignored. Now present. Now believing. Then Maria saw Gloria seated in the third row, hands clasped tightly, her chin held high. Behind her sat Aisha, the new director of internal integrity. Young. Fierce. Watching Maria like she was studying scripture. And in the back corner, Liam. Smiling. She walked past the board members slowly, not with pride, but with gravity. A cleaner with no mop. A woman who had swept the lies out by hand. The hearing continued for hours, but Maria didn't stay. She'd said what needed to be said. The truth was out now, alive, documented, undeniable. Outside, the sky had cleared. Sunlight broke through the gray and fractured shards falling across the courthouse steps as Maria descended them slowly. Reporters surged forward, but she raised her hand gently. "No statements today," she said. "What do you want people to know?" one called out. She stopped, turned, then said, "Don't ever think your silence protects you. It protects them. Speak." And she walked away. Back through the city she used to clean, back to the place where she once polished brass handles and emptied bins back before anyone knew her name. She wasn't returning to mop floors. She was returning to rebuild what had been broken. From the inside out. They gave her the option of an office on the top floor. Glass walls, a view of the river, a nameplate in brushed gold. She turned it down. Instead, Maria requested a small corner space near the employee resource wing. No windows, just 2 chairs, a desk, and a whiteboard where she wrote one phrase every Monday in black ink. What they call small is often the beginning of everything big. It became a kind of quiet ritual. Employees would pass by, glance at the new quote, and sometimes leave their own notes pinned beneath it. Anonymous words, folded slips of paper. Stories, warnings, truths. Maria read them all. She never signed her name in memos, never gave speeches at shareholder events. She let the systems speak for themselves now. Systems built not for performance, but protection. For every worker, from every level. 6 months had passed since Victor Langston's arrest. The civil suits were ongoing. Some board members had been ousted, others quietly stepped down before subpoenas arrived. The building no longer carried the stench of untouchable power. It smelled of coffee, printer ink, real work, and redemption. But it hadn't been easy. Maria had received threats, messages from anonymous accounts, a brick through the window of her apartment one night. No one was ever caught. But she didn't flinch, not once. Because every step she took now carried the weight of hundreds, and she was no longer alone. One Thursday morning, as winter flirted with spring, Maria was called to a meeting she hadn't expected. Not with the board, not with the SEC, but with the janitorial staff. 6 of them seated in a small break room, most older, one barely 20, all wearing the same uniform Maria used to fold on her bed with trembling hands. They stood when she entered. She smiled gently. "Please, sit." The eldest, a man named Raphael, spoke first. "We just wanted to say, we saw everything. What you did, what you faced, and we're proud." Maria's throat tightened. "You gave people like us more than hope," he continued. "You gave us proof." The youngest, Kayla, pulled something from her backpack. A small canvas hand-painted. It was a sweeping image, a mop handle turning into a sword rising from marble tiles. Below it the words, "She cleaned the truth until it couldn't hide anymore." Maria stared at it for a long moment, then reached out, hands trembling slightly, and held it like it was made of glass. "Thank you," she whispered. "This means more than any headline." Raphael nodded. "We thought maybe when you're ready we could hang it in the lobby." She looked up. That same lobby where she had once been escorted out like a criminal. That same marble where executives used to walk past her like a shadow. Now they wanted to put her story in the open, not for her glory, but for their legacy. Maria agreed. The canvas was mounted the next morning. No ceremony, no ribbon, just presence. And from that day on, every employee who entered the building walked past it. Some paused, some didn't, but everyone saw it, and that was enough. 1 month later, Maria took a train to visit her niece at college. The girl, now studying public policy, met her on the steps of the campus caf with a grin and 2 cups of cocoa. "You know your name's in textbooks now," she said. Maria raised an eyebrow. "I doubt that." "No, seriously. There's a case study called the Delgado Principle. Professors are using it to teach ethical oversight. Whistleblower courage. It's huge." Maria laughed softly, shaking her head. "I just asked a question in a room full of people who didn't think I had the right to." Her niece leaned in, eyes glowing. "Exactly. That's the part they'll remember." Later, they sat beneath a tree where petals drifted like soft snow, and Maria shared stories not about betrayal, but about rebuilding. She told her niece the truth of what courage really meant. Not bold declarations, but quiet endurance. Not the absence of fear, but the refusal to surrender to it. She said nothing about revenge. only redemption. That night, as the train hummed its way back toward the city skyline, Maria leaned against the glass and closed her eyes. She dreamed of a time when no one would have to be brave just to be heard, a time when boardrooms would be as honest as break rooms, when janitors and CEOs would be measured not by their titles, but by the weight of their integrity. She didn't know if she'd live to see that world, but she knew she had helped carve a path toward it. One document, one voice, one floor at a time. When the train pulled into the station, she stepped off without fanfare. Just a woman once mocked for asking the wrong question, now known for uncovering the right truth. And in her silence, the company had learned how to listen, in a world that often rewards silence and punishes truth. Maria Delgado stood as a quiet revolution. She had no title, no power, no platform, only a question in a room where she wasn't welcome to ask one. Yet, that single act of courage shattered a fortress built on arrogance and fraud. Her story reminds us that dignity is not granted by rank, it is owned by character. That power doesn't reside in corner offices, it lives in the courage to speak when others expect your silence. And that justice, though slow, can arrive like a storm unseen until it breaks everything false into pieces. We all walk past invisible people every day, but what if the one you ignore is the one holding the key to your integrity? Never underestimate quiet hands. Never mock humility, because sometimes the cleaner isn't just wiping away dust, she's uncovering the truth that no one else dared to see. This isn't just a story of justice. It's a call to listen, to act, to rise, especially when no one expects you to, because the smallest voices, when fueled by truth, can change the world.